Good afternoon. Welcome to our special electronic meeting. This is Washington City, December 15th, 2020. We're holding a public meeting at 4 o'clock hosted by the Washington City offices located in our city offices. The meeting is broadcast via YouTube Live. Those of you that would like to join us is on washingtoncity.org/meetings. We welcome our council and members of staff that are here and guests. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I second. Bundy.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Move on to our development agreement. Item A, continuation of a consideration to approve a development agreement for the Long Valley Trails, a PCD development located 3000 East, 1600 South Long Valley Road. Applicant, Brennan Family Holdings, LLC.
Gentlemen, what we had in this development agreement, so just so you're aware, the development agreement, which was starting the basis of this agreement, was from our Sienna Hills project, our last project we had here. So Brio was our most recent one, but Sienna Hills was the one this one's based upon. And so what had gone into that was taking our Sienna Hills development agreement from a number of years ago, taking it and then making and personalizing it for this project, for the Long Valley project. And I have, so because for the developer, there's a real need to try to get it finished before the end of the year. So just as a reminder, since everybody hasn't done these every time we've had to come up, but every development agreement we have in our city, you do that PCD because it's the biggest chunk of the documents. That's the thing you look at when you're trying to get the overview. What's my city going to look like when this project is done? That's kind of what the PCD plan itself does. And it creates the zone and all the circumstances and all of the land uses that incorporate that land area. What typically happens, what's happened every time we've done it about 5 times, is that's the meat of it. It takes a while to get together and to put together. That's what you approved last week on the 9th, was that PCD plan. Generally what happens is there's several months that go by at the very least where you put an agreement together that fits with whatever that plan ended up being, because you work on that plan for so long. Again, that's really where the meat and bones is on it. And even though the development agreement was kind of running parallel with it, the actual agreement itself, there's typically a little more of a lag time in there. Having said that, it doesn't matter that there's a lag time, because the nice thing is we have a lot of experience with even this particular development agreement. And so you tell me how I can help you most. I've spent the last big chunk of hours just making it easier to read, because what I don't like in these development agreements sometimes is that they start using language that's so not just necessarily archaic, but just is so fraught with land use legal terms that you start wondering what was even said there. What did compelling interest mean, and how did that affect whether or not the city gets to enact land use laws later on that affect it?
This is the version that you just gave us is the modified version, the one you've been working on, right?
Right.
And we and the changes in here, they're not like red line, right? So
I have, and for whatever reason, my red line I can't pull up. I want to get a clean copy too, so I printed a clean copy out, and my red line won't pull up. So,
and then I guess there was a bunch of changes that were submitted by council to different departments. did all the departments get the changes that they wanted in?
Yeah, and most of those were already there. Most of those were already there long before now. My efforts, just from the one you saw last week, my efforts just in the last few days have just simply been to clean it up so we're at a point where we don't have a lot of filling in of things and confusion on what some of these land use principles mean inside of it. The PCD itself has been running parallel with the agreement with all of the department heads who are affected by it anyway. So community development, public works, parks and recreation.
So obviously, we as a council have read the initial draft by Mr. Day. I'm not an attorney, so all the little nuances of verbiage and definitions, I'm not going to catch that from the news. So I'm not sure the comfort level with the rest of the council with this. I tend not to have concerns with your revisions, Jeff. I've seen your work before, but I do have just some questions and some clarifications just a few items as of the content of the agreement that we were given.
Sure.
And there was a few things that I wanted to clarify.
Well, good. I hope
That's kind of where I'm at right now.
that would be easier for me to respond to, because there's a lot that I do in it just because it's bottom, and I know it doesn't mesh real well. So anything you have, council, that you saw that might have been confusing in it, because there were one or two questions.
I'm happy to lead off with a few things unless somebody else has some items that you guys okay with that?
Oh, you go.
So one of the things I found interesting was this section 6.3 or 6, section 6, but 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5.
Page 7.
Yeah,
and 8.
just the use of density. I found that interesting, and I wanted to get a little bit of staff's feedback. It just, the way I read it, and again, I'm not an attorney, but I read the fact that those densities can be moved around within each of the different parcels or pods, and I just wanted to get staff's feedback as far as, is that usual and customary, and are they comfortable with that?
Staff did have some concerns. In fact, Drew had some I had some concerns with it just because the number jumped out as so big. Drew had even more drilled down concerns because of at least two of the parcels. And you guys know, because you have really put a lot of time in with the PCD plan itself. We have parcels 14 and 15 that have a lot of really high density stuff, condominiums, and possibly even family apartments. So multifamily apartments. So we tried to address that in a way that, because we've had those come before us before, where the developer can request, I can just adjust my densities up to X amount. I think we tried that with Brio. We may have even tried a little bit with Sienna Hills, Drew, probably a little bit, where they end up working a lot with Drew on it to get approval for that. None of them were anywhere near the 150%. In talking to Drew, and again, he's probably the comfort level that my only judgment of comfort level comes from Drew. He was the most he felt comfortable with was going to 115 in terms of just being able to bring it in as a administrative amendment. In other words, it wouldn't come back to you guys. This would be something that they work with Drew on without never coming back for a PCD amendment. And just to make, but also to make clear that those two high density intended uses for condominiums and multifamily apartments were the ones where if you increase 15%, if you increase 50%, it could be massive on condominiums. And so
Well, and I liked what the Councilman Ward, I think, that said in one of the meetings, is that, those higher density units are right along the Parkway there. So I tend to like where those are.
sure.
And then it also looks like if they subcontract some of the building, and it sounds like that might not be the case. It looks like they've designed this to maybe assign it to Brennan, the whole contract to Brennan, or to DR Horton.
That's my understanding also.
But it sounds like they would, if there's unused densities in certain parcels or pods, however they're referring to it, those could then come back and be used elsewhere. And I don't know. I'd like to hear the council's take. I'd like to hear staff's take on that.
Drew had, I thought Drew's head was going to explode a couple of times because he sees densities and he sees units going up and he gets concerned with the higher intense densities with it. And this one in particular, the one thing to not forget is the way this one was drafted was the opportunity for the developer to simply do it, to make a change to that PCD agreement or the PCD plan, just working with Drew. So administrative amendment, an administrative adjustment to the plan, as opposed to coming in for just an amendment to the city council like we have seen a number of times on Sienna Hills and on Brio, where they come in and they make an amendment or request an amendment to the PCD plan. So it changes enough that Drew says, I'm not comfortable just giving you an extra 2 townhomes over there. So it doesn't take away the opportunity for whoever develops it to say, hey, I think 150% would be perfect here in parcel 14. Maybe it would be. We're also assured that we're not going to, the densities will not go higher, at least the unit numbers. The total unit numbers won't go higher based on that. But what it does do is that if it gets to the point where Drew, which 115 was as much as Drew felt comfortable with, if it ever got above 115, he felt that it should come to the council just to talk to the council about it and make sure you're comfortable with it. Because it's hard to tell ahead of time how these impact them. And as a developer, you want as much flexibility as you can. You want to have to come back to the city council as few times as you can.
Right.
And every time you do, like it or not, anybody that lives around them who originally had concerns, they feel almost an obligation to make sure they remind council that that's their neighborhood. It's more units. There's more I wanted. So
If that adjustment were made from 150 to, within a parcel does not exceed 115%, would that resolve any of your concerns, Drew? Is that the only concern you have with that?
Yes, I probably should have came up earlier. I'm comfortable with that because I don't want to leave them right at 100 and then we have to come back for amendments, especially a small one. Just to be fair to the developer, I will share with you, Sienna Hills is a great example I use. Sienna Hills said they're going to have X amount of units, and let's just say I'm going to keep it simple. They say we're going to come in at 1,000 units, more than that, but I'm just using this as the analogy and example. But Sienna Hills came in under every time, and even Mike can sit there and say that water lines were oversized, sewer lines were oversized because they had X amount of units up here, but they ended up, because of topography, things like that, that the units came in down here. And so I'm fine with giving them, if they have the ground, they want to bump up, we're not trying to not have units. I know it sounds weird for a city, but when you develop for a water line to be amount X and a sewer line to be amount X and you don't use it, that's wasted space and use, on that, and that you got to keep that water line full of water all the time. So we'd rather, I'm fine with them trying to keep those densities
So minor
this way.
adjustments, but not.
Right. I just, the 150 and the 150 really hit me hard. I'm sitting there going, oh, all of a sudden I have these condos that are already at 3, whatever they are. It's a high number and they're at 22 dwelling units per acre. Let's say they bump up because they only came in with X amount way down here and they're going to transfer them all over to that. And all of a sudden now I went from 22 dwelling units per acre up to say 28 or 30. That's where my heartburn came in.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that's why I'm fine with 115, having that flexibility to say, yeah, we don't have to go back to council. We took care of that in your development agreement. You can, where you said you were going to do 85 here, you can now have 93, whatever the 15%, they want to go. We feel free with going up to that because the development agreement allowed us to do so without coming back. Because I don't like PCD amendments, especially when you think of all the people you have to notify sometimes. And it's a hard thing. So I just assume keep as many amendments down. And this is one of those tools to use because it's usually a density thing sometimes.
And council, maybe both of you can answer this question. So if we modified that to 115%, and we can ask the applicant for their input too, would it be possible to add some verbiage, and you would know the right verbiage, Jeff, but maybe accepting condos, accepting condos and apartments? Or
I actually
those
have that.
pods?
That's the language that's been
In the new-
redrafted into it.
Okay.
So when Drew mentioned it, so those are the two concerns he had. Is one is 150 just seems a lot no matter what parcel it is. no matter what you're using there. But
We're already, it
anything
seems
after
like on the very high
anything
end
above
on those
115 is
particular-
problematic with condos anyway. So that's been redrafted in 6.3. But it's also clear that this doesn't foreclose the developer from coming in and requesting a PCD change, though, because maybe it fits perfect that we're going to put, 500 of them, those units as apartments or something at some point.
Can I just get a little clarification here? It seems fairly straightforward, but
use that same words.
if,
Accepting. How about that?
excuse me, if they come in and they want to increase it from 24 to 28 or 30, whatever, in a certain area, that's going to essentially reduce the units somewhere else, because the overall number of units is not going to be exceeded by this. So it's just a matter of shifting the number of units from one place to the other, but keeping it at that 115 is an administrative for you to deal with, so it doesn't have to go through the PCD. Okay.
And then we will, it's like when you go to 6.4, it says they're going to provide that, and we'll know anyway. We'll keep an eye on it, but they're always going to say, I've used up 117 of my 2361. Now I have, 22, whatever it may be. And then as each final plat gets in, that number goes from 2361 down.
They
down,
provide
down.
not, and they provide not by part of the agreement in 6.4, just underneath. The council stated was asking about use of density. They provide an audit each time it comes in. So Shrew is always mindful of what's going on.
And you've already made these changes. Good
Well,
grief.
yeah, those are
You're
all
a
made.
step ahead. You're a step ahead of the questions we're asking. Wow.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, had the red line popped up, it just would have popped out. But still, the issues were very clear where they were issues that staff really couldn't live with them, just couldn't. And so if it were going to get down to that, it would have to be developer just trying to convince the city council that staff wasn't going to give what they wanted. The one thing that's nice about this and what's unique that these guys brought in is that they've provided some very specific instances when an administrator can do just an administrative adjustment of this agreement, of the plan, that automatically doesn't require city council action for an amendment to basically a zone amendment. And the nice thing about it is if it ever gets to that level because I'm assuming it should be Drew, but in some cases it may actually fall on Mike Shaw because it may be something that really affects the public works more. If they get to that point where they think, yeah, this seems like it should be easy, but man, I just don't know how that's going to, they can suggest to be shifted into that it needs to be a modification to the agreement, to the plan.
Well, as an example to that, if there's several parcels in a given area that the density is increased, perhaps the staff might say we need to look at the traffic situation here, or the utilities, I guess, whatever it be. So at that point in time, you'd have that ability, an opportunity to ask the developer to.
Right. It says if you go to section 22, way back on page, I think 17, it kind of says if staff feels that, the administrative person feels uncomfortable, they always have the right, and this is their attorney putting that in, to go before the, say, I want this to go before the council.
Yep.
And it would be, and that's a great example, because say I have two of their major roads all of a sudden are crossing here, and that's the one they really want to bump up X amount of units, and we're going, oh, the traffic study was based on 100 units, but now you're using your 115, card here, your get out of jail free card here, and all of a sudden, but it makes that traffic study go, puts it in a bad, from a C to a D minus. Then we say, we're going to back off this and go to that's how they're graded.
We were talking
grades. Sorry, I knew that would come with Councilman State. We were just talking outside about grades. But that's where the traffic, if it goes from that, then we'd really feel and come say, I don't feel so comfortable doing that. Let's go with the council so that it's all out there. And that's a great example.
And that's when they identify areas under 22 in which infrastructure, modification, location, and or sizing of the infrastructure for the project that does not materially change the functionality of the infrastructure. But it's using people like Mike, it's using people like Drew, who know more than just they can't get to the bridge as fast as they used to be able to get there. Then if it gets above that point, then they'll bring it back to the council anyway for a plan adjustment. But here it defines it, so there's much more flexibility for Drew and Mike to go ahead and do it.
Jeff, another thing that I really like that as I open your revisions, I had concerns and questions from 7.6 on, and you've completely cut that out.
Those are the
Those are the
arbitration.
outsourcing of development applications and future. I really like the way you tightened that up, because I had questions and concerns about that whole area. And so I think that's,
What's that? 6.5. Yeah, let me see.
did you remove return of unused density staying on 6.5?
I don't think so. I think it's still here.
Okay, that's still there.
6.5 parcels. Oh, and the parcel says something brand new, by the way. And so these guys, the group they're using from up in Salt Lake, Schnell and Wilmer, they're clearly staying with cutting edge with legislature. So Council Ivy, this is why we need you up there every week, this legislative session, because of the land use changes. And as you guys know, for example, subdividing is anytime you take a piece of land, no matter how big or how small, you turn it into more than one piece. It's subdividing. You have to go through the same process. It might be a small subdivision approval, but just this last year in 2020, the legislature approved that supports that 6.45 about parcel sales, which is what kept occurring in Sienna Hills, where they'd take off a chunk they had a chunk and Ents would buy a chunk and S&S would buy a chunk of Sienna Hills, but you wouldn't see it until it came for the final plat. And that's because Sitla retained ownership of it. This will be a private project. So every time that the owner that Brennan sells off a chunk of it under previous Utah law, that's a subdividing of land. They would have to come in just to say we're breaking off a chunk so that in 4 months we can come back in with our subdivision plan. It's difficult. It's just time consuming, because we all know that's what's going to happen out here. This provides a way to do it.
So I like what you've done in section 7 as well. If there's, I have a few more, unless somebody else wants to jump in. I don't mean to take time. I'm happy to defer, but on section 9, Washington Dam improvements, we talked about the trail as being part of that cross section, as Councilman Coates had mentioned. And I wanted to just make sure that that's part of this agreement as well. I know that it was likely updated in the big book and in the exhibits, but I wanted to make sure that that land, the 10-foot asphalt trail from the underpass to Long Valley all the way to Country Way is part of the verbiage there.
Yeah, I think it actually falls under the trail system somewhere else.
So I read that, unless you modified, I read over to the other trail systems, but it didn't specifically talk about the trail system along Washington Dam Road. It did talk about the trails within Long Valley, and I have a couple of thoughts there too. But I'd like this development agreement to specify the improvements to Washington Dam Road also include that trail from the entrance to their project to Country Way, whatever the best verbiage is.
And I wonder if Mike even knows, because these are really, the Washington Dam Road is one of the areas that I just conferred with Mike about, to find out if we're covered in it, if they adequately declare what needs to be done, what we get out of it, what the developer gets out of it. And you're right, there's nothing about the trail in that particular one, but I can well imagine it's in our cross sections of Washington Dam Road. Maybe not, Mike. You could probably. But
it does specify some of the improvements, and I know it's a joint project, and I know that the city has an interest in getting that done. I know that the developer has an interest in that as the primary access, but I just think that might be the best place to address the trail that we talked about the other night. Not that I don't think they'll do it, but good contracts make for good relationships, I think.
Well, yeah, no, and I just suspect that it probably doesn't fall into the cross sections of Washington Dam Road, or otherwise it probably would have been that, because they were careful to make sure that they did refer to those things which they had contributed to, including storm drains, culinary waters, telephone, cable TV, natural gas. And they went out of their way to indicate those.
Right.
Jim may even know how that's affected. No.
Right.
So could I ask a question along that same line? As far as the Washington Dam Road improvements, 11.5 indicates 7,179 feet will be partially constructed. Can somebody tell me what partially constructed means in this case?
I'm sorry, on 36.
On 11.5, page 10.
Denise asked me to come up. She wants anything I say to be on recording, I guess. Where are we talking?
Yeah, it just indicates will be partially constructed.
Jim, get up to the,
I understand it's kind of
get
a,
closer to the mic, Jim.
Yeah, the whole road's going to be constructed.
that's what I'm thinking. That's why I'm wondering why it says partially.
I think just can't strike partially.
Okay.
I don't.
You see that there, Jeff?
I see portion of
I didn't see.
Third
partially.
line down.
that portion of Washington that you're referring to, Council Bundy.
Yeah, the Washington Dam.
Portion of Washington Drive extending from existing improved section to the perimeter boundary of the project for approximately 79 feet.
Will be partially constructed as shown.
Oh, partially constructed. There
So
we go.
just strike partially. I'm not
That'll
sure
be
why
fine.
that was in there.
It's shown on the approved plans up there. Oh, well, on the approved plans for Washington Dam Road. So my reference is probably your plans for Washington Dam Road as opposed to part of the PCD plan. So I'm guessing.
Is that what
There's
it
no
means?
I'm
partial
just looking at it from a simplistic standpoint. You know, I don't know what the plans are, but I've always understood that it's going to be fully improved. But then it says partially. So
Well, maybe
if we can strike
just
partially, that's
easily
fine.
come out. 'Cause it still says as constructed as shown on the approved plan for Washington Dam Road. So
I don't know anything about those approved. None of us know anything about those, assuming that it's fully improved to city standard, which is what I understand.
That's the plan. So I just partially is just confusing.
So Mike, do you know just offhand what part of Washington Dam Road would the developer be developing? Is that going to be something that runs along the side of there? So I'm not quite sure where the just the general reference point is for Washington Dam Road and their project. Is it on the outside of it? Isn't it?
Yeah, it parallels Washington Dam Road improvements, the trail system up to, it'll basically follow the canal and will end just before Country Way, because that's where it'll go off and tied to the Country Way trail system and the Hill trail system there. It won't extend the full length of the reconstruction.
The PCD plan says from Country Way to Long Valley Road.
But we're talking the road, not the trail here, right? We're talking,
Oh, we're talking both.
but we're talking
I'm
the
sorry, I
road
was-
right here.
Yeah, I was talking road. I apologize.
The road will go from 1900 east out to the interchange access road.
But it'll be fully
Fully
improved.
improved.
Did they use the word partially, maybe because it's a joint project, so to
Well,
speak? You're both working on it.
I think really that came from probably early on, because we were looking at just a partial build early on, not a
Okay.
complete full width.
I agree with the councilman just to strike the
Just
verbiage,
take
yeah.
Will you give me the section for that again? Sorry.
Dot 5
11.5
on the old one.
on the,
Looking at the old one.
Old and the new.
Yeah, and the new one too.
Page 10 on the new.
So on 11.7, it talks about the trails. There is a variety of paved, gravel, and natural trails constructed by Brennan, I guess, or assignees. And then the city shall agree to enter into agreement to own and maintain the same. Do we, I guess my concern is I know the city's ramping up and catching up to maintain asphalt trails, but are we as a city prepared to maintain the gravel and the natural trails? I mean, we could be talking 3 miles of those trails in addition to 3 miles of paved trails. And I'm just wondering if that might be more appropriately maintained by the association and the city maintaining the asphalt trails.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. One thing it did mention is that it would be, the trails would be to city standard. But again, I don't know what the city standards are in detail, but
I don't think the
but
city
I-
has a standard for gravel trail.
There was a sentence that
that's what I wondered, is whether there is anything for a gravel trail.
So-
I don't know, but
So this is Barry. We do not have, the only standard we have is for asphalt. So if the city is willing to do that down the road and to maintain those things, that's something we'd have to look at. But right now we do not have any other standard than the 10-foot wide paved trail.
Well, right. So at this point, the city is not taking over any of the trails, and we're not taking over any of the parks. And my understanding is their intention is to build a city standard park, and then we would address that in the future to potentially take that over. But none of the agreements state anything other than that, correct? I'm seeing a lot of heads. Thank you.
Now, in light of
That's
that,
not how I read it.
in 11.7, it says the trail system shall be integrated into the city's public park system. And so
Yeah.
that's a little contrary to what your thoughts are. And
It also says right here, though, in the new version, the city reserves the right to reject the dedication of these trails if it is determined that these trails do not meet the city standard. So if the trail doesn't meet our standard, we have the right to reject it. At the very end.
That's correct. And we've talked about that. We are certainly willing to take those over and to maintain those parks and those trails if they are to our standard. We would like to do that. But that's just would be a requirement.
So in this document, though, the document is stating that the city is intending to do that. That we have is that everybody's agreement that that's that the city is intending to do that on the trail systems?
I think
This seems like a special, I wondered that also because it seems like a special case in terms of trails. Trails are so consistent as to anything that's at city standards, the city reserves the right to accept it if it's a standard. But this one does refer to, and I don't know where the language originally came from, but upon completion, the city agrees to enter into an applicable agreement to own and maintain the thing. It almost reads as if somebody had been negotiating that already. And so I'm not sure if there's anything different there, Jim, than anything else.
No, what the intent here is to say that the trails in Long Valley can be public whether the city takes them or not. We're not going to close our trail system off. It's going to be integrated into the city public trail system. That doesn't say you're going to own them or maintain them.
Regardless of paved, natural, gravel.
But what it does, and then it says further that the city
I'm having
reserves
trouble
the right to-
understanding you. If you feel comfortable while you're talking, would you maybe open your? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the intent of this is that the trails will be open to the public for use, regardless of whether they're maintained by the HOA or they become city trails. The second sentence reserves the city's right to whether they accept the trails or not. So all we're saying is that we're going to integrate them into the public trail system so the public has the use of them. That doesn't say you're going to own them or maintain them. And then you have the right to reserve the right to take them if you don't like them for whatever reason.
but it says
Dedicated.
determine that these trails do not.
We had that conversation.
Well, but it's a little bit more than that because it's trail system shall be integrated as part of the city's public park system. Does it need to be public trail system?
I think that trails are extension.
I guess it is. I'm just.
Semantics.
But if that's your intent, that verbiage would get.
I think as long as we have that ability, as the last sentence indicates, that the city has the ability to.
That's true.
Intent here was not to close the trails to the public.
Yeah.
That if people go or riding or walking through Long Valley, that they can use that trail system, that it's not shut up for just exclusive of the residents.
So,
It's open to the
for
public.
example, you may do 3 miles of paved trails, 3 miles of natural and gravel. You'll meet with the city. Barry will say, yes, these 3 miles of paved meet our standard. We were happy to have receive these into the city trail system and we'll maintain those. Whereas the others, we could decline to take those, and then the HOA, the owners there would be responsible to maintain those.
That's correct, but they wouldn't be closed off to the public. They'd still be accessible.
Jeff, does that language? Are we good with that language that's in there for the way we've described it?
Well, see, this is the part of the language, because again, when I read this one, that's my thought too, because it reads a little different than most of them do, clearly.
We can't hear you.
Denise is complaining about me again. So this one did read a little different than most of them do, and you get used to that cadence of them. And so I thought the same thing as you did. What probably gives me more comfort that it's not some type of a trap that, we thought we would be able to get out of it easy, but we've agreed to enter into an agreement. But
I guess my question is just, is it clear? Yeah. Is it clear enough for what we're talking about right now? Or is there, we need to, because I think there's other issues. I'd like to move on if we can.
Yeah, but for this reason, because if you really were going to if you're going to tie the city to it, that they had to enter into it, I think you'd make it very clear. And that's part of what I did when I went through, is to make it, if it's
just
ambiguous,
two aspects.
make it
One is
clear.
the aspect that they're committing that this is open to the public. Two, that they're not committing to. I mean, I see that that the city is okay to not take the dedication, but so if you're okay with that.
Council, just so you know, we just did this with Brendan, with Jim up in Green Spring this past year, with a number of trails that connected into Green Spring Park. We looked at those, we accepted them the way that they were, and then they did a quick claim deed to us, and so those are now city trails. So it'd be the same type of thing.
And they met our standard.
Yes.
I think you have another in 11.9. I think you have a similar situation where there may be a number of parks, but the central park that we discussed last night might be the only one that meets city standards. I don't know if it needs to be specified that there will be a central park. I know that was a part of the conditions, but it sounds like the trail or the parks that don't meet our standard would still be maintained by the HOA. But if one does, then and is dedicated, then it would go to the city. Is that how everyone understands that?
Yeah, the background on that, there again with Barry, we've had discussions with Barry about what's a public park and what's not. And I think we're all in agreement that we would like a good portion of that Central Park become public. We're just not at the detailed design level to know if we can meet that or not. So this is just saying the option's open, but at the end of the day, the city reserves the right to take them or not take them.
Did we, my recollection is that the agreement between the city and the developer was that there would be a central park that meets city standards. Is that how you understood it too?
Yes, the new language and the changes I made and got to you this last week says that the central park will include a minimum of a 4-acre park area that will meet city standards. It doesn't necessarily.
That's how I understood it too. That park at least that park would be a city park to meet that standard, and that we would take that over.
But we've reserved the right for the city that they don't have to take it if they don't like it. We don't want to tie your hands to a park until you see the plans for the park.
Other than the city would like to have a park there. And so we would really recommend up front that is done as a city park, and that we would take that over down the road.
It's D.R. Horton's hope that entire Central Park can become a public park. That's way, way more important.
Is there any,
again, if that's really important, we ought to just,
is there any need to put
agree
Central
to it.
Park in this 11.9, or is it already addressed? And whoever has thoughts on that, I don't know.
well, I think I'm comfortable with the fact that we're not required to take it. But the bigger question is, from what I hear people saying, is that maybe we do want to tie each other to it in this particular case. It's not a matter of whether or not we'll accept it, because I think they've been very careful, and we've been very careful, but about being able to reject it at any point if we don't like it. But if it's really important, and I hear Barry saying that, and I hear maybe you two, council, also saying it's really important, we ought to lock it down. But again, I'm not sure right now it's even a possibility.
Well, I think this paragraph handles it very well. We're stating that it's our intent that this become public parks, but that it's not, the city's not bound to accept it as a public park until we get to step 2 or 3 down the road. It's impossible to go to Barry and ask Barry to approve something as a public park until we give him a park plan, and we're not at that point yet.
I like the verbiage where it says the construction of the parks in consultation and cooperation with the city. So it sounds like you'll work together on that. And
Yeah, that's the intent. I think the intent's clearly there, and I think it gives the city the protection that they don't have to take it if it doesn't meet their standards.
We had a situation out at Sticky where I think some of the residents out there wanted to have a park come into the city, but because it wasn't built to standards, we weren't be able to. Let me just step back to look at this for just a second. Development agreements detail the obligations of both parties, and the contract needs to be good, of course, for both sides to have a good contract. Jim and Jeff, do you ever see the need for any additional future development agreements? I know that they can be made after this point. Do you ever see a need for one of those, and anything that we may be able to address tonight that would?
For this one itself?
Yeah.
Well, no, this one I think really covers
It covers
in
it
fact,
all.
if anything, I peeled stuff out that just weren't clear. And, you know, and I you know, the reality is I and Mike and Jim aren't going to be around forever. And some of these development agreements seems like they last almost forever. So the clearer they are for me just gives me the comfort that they're going to be taken care of the way they're intended to.
Oh, this next question is kind of for you, Jim. Is Brennan, D.R. Horton, and yourself comfortable with the agreement from your side? I mean, is there something that we need to look at to make it, you know, so that it works well going forward, or are you good with it?
No, we're good with it. And to give you a little background, because Jeff's coming in kind of, apologize, late to the party, if you will. I sent an email string out to everybody today. This agreement substantially in its final form was available in July. And because of issues with Jeff's schedule and things, the city made the decision to have hire Mike Day as an outside counsel to review this. And so this has been going back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. I don't want you to feel, you know, not picking with Jeff here, but I don't want you to feel like we're here tonight reviewing this development agreement for the first time. It's gone through numerous iterations with your attorney, Mike Day, and my attorney, AJ Pepper. AJ Pepper works for Snell and Wilmer. Our main attorney there is John Andrews. John Andrews was the lead counsel for Sitla for decades. And so John actually used AJ Pepper when they created Coral Canyon and when they created Sienna Hills.
So you feel comfortable?
So we feel very,
very
comfortable.
About it?
All the legal terms and legalese, you know, I'll say this from an engineer standpoint. I can give a plan to an engineer or surveyor, and I can give it to 10 engineers or surveyor, and each 10 of them will have a little different way of doing something. Same way with attorneys. So I'm comfortable that Jeff's comfortable with this, but I don't want you to think that we're here tonight unprepared.
No, I don't think any of us do. Jeff, this question's for you. Jeff, this question's for you in the next one. What I've heard the council tonight and previous nights, there's been a question that's kind of the recurring theme, and that is, it's a two-part question if you want to answer them both. The first one is that how do we monitor this? How do we monitor it, and then how do we maintain this throughout the life of the project to make sure that all this development agreement is adhered to? Can you explain that?
Well, to a great extent, these development agreements and just the oversight of them and the life they take on, I mean, the biggest factor is the demand of our housing in our market. So 2008, it didn't matter how many development agreements we had.
Sorry, Jeff, I don't think you understood exactly what I'm saying. Is how are we assured as a city council that the elements of this agreement are going to be adhered to going forward?
Because every application they bring in so the way it has to work.
So step by step through the process.
Making subdivisions.
Mm-hmm.
We know what they're going to do on this one. Horton's going to be the primary takedown.
It has to do with staff. Staff's going to have to review it and say, does it meet the
so every
agreement?
single
Yes.
one.
And that is a really good question, because I'll give you an example of that. And it is going to come back staff. The area where I live was a PCD 20 years ago, whatever it's been. And nothing ever was followed through. It just the ball got dropped. There is no such thing as a PCD up in my area. There's a map, the whole deal, but nothing ever got followed through with. And so that's a very good question, and something that I think we are in a different day, and we probably graduated from way things happened 20 years ago, but that is a very valid question.
Yeah, let me address that, because most of the changes in the first draft of the development agreement to the final one that you had was about whether it can be done as an administrative review or it comes back to council. Ultimately, Drew or whoever you assign to be the administrator for land use policy can make any decision and can, for any reason, bring that back to city council. It clearly says that in the development agreement. Most of the changes were made was to take away administrative reviews and put them back to the typical city subdivision review process. So even though we were trying to not shortcut, but simplify the approval process, because we've been through all this, We didn't get that. It came right back to the fact that we're going to come back to you with every preliminary plat, every final plat, all construction drawings that will run through every single lot. You will see at least twice more through a preliminary and final plat. So the ability for the staff to do that was severely curtailed into red lines. And Mike Day was pretty tight on saying, no, we're going to go back through the city approval process. We're going to bring it back to city council. They can approve this every step of the way.
Thanks, Jim. Just one last question, Jeff, and that is, do we have a staff member that is directly responsible for monitoring this agreement and following through with it? Would that fall to Mr. Drew Ellerman?
Well, I think Drew can answer that because I've watched him basically manage or oversee Sienna Hills, Coral Canyon, Rio. What else we got? Sunrise Valley before it.
And he does a great job.
Found.
A great job. But just want some assurances that this is a very complex, 800-page document. Just I think what the council is looking for is just some assurances that the things that are in this will be monitored, because obviously we're not going to refer back to this, from time to time.
No, what the beauty of it, what this allows them, they know what every bit of that land out there, if they want to change out to come an amendment, they know they've got approval to put in townhomes on pod 14. Or condos on pod 14, 15. They've got that approval already. They just need to get their, conditional use permit like anybody else, just to show the elevation so the planning commission can see that, just because we have more than, X amount of units. But this gives them full ability to move forward on so many things. And the beauty about the development agreement, I don't throw this a lot, but a lot of it's for Mike on trigger points, and that's what we want, is that Mike knows that now he can go prepare for those things. And so can the developer. They know at this point, this is going to happen. You don't have to come in and negotiate this stuff out. It's in there. It's trigger points. It'll happen here, 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 and here. Then it saves time with you folks and all the other process, that all those things are going to be locked in now between the zoning and this agreement puts in those points that will happen at this. And so they already know where they're at. And that's the beauty of the PCD.
I think this also clarifies the Long Valley Parkway extension that we talked about the other night. I like the verbiage. It says required to meet the need for an emergency secondary access. We understand that. We understand the way that it's going to be constructed. And we understand also that the right-of-way has been obtained. Or comply with future traffic needs as determined by subsequent traffic impact studies. So I think that's a very fair way to handle that. We were wrestling with that the other night. I like that. I like that verbiage.
Yeah, as I think a little more about the process and making sure that things get followed through with, I think just the plat application process is going to trigger the questions. If preliminary plat, final plat, whenever an application's made, it's going to prompt staff to make sure that everything follows suit with the agreement.
And one thing I would recommend is that when we get an application, we have their PCD in our app packet so that we can reference it back. It doesn't have to be the whole book, but at least a reference, because that's something we can get
comes to you.
That's fine, as long as you put it in a subfolder.
I don't want the whole book.
Well, good. You guys are in the construction.
No, I just want to be able to go back to the map and say, okay, this map was approved for this many density on this pod, and just make it simple. It doesn't need to be the language stuff. It's just the maps that help me. I don't know about the rest of the council.
That's your language.
But we also should have all our PCDs in our city in a subfolder that we can all reference at any time on these, because this is the newest one where we find revenue electronically. All the other ones are so old. You can scan them in, Drew.
Already 2021, New Year's goal.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm just saying it'd be nice to have a reference.
I want the council to understand that the goal in our development agreement was, one, to meet all the city standards, but it was also protect ourselves and you, because the people, our own worst enemy are going to be our buyers. Yeah, as you can see, the public hearing for this approval for over 2,000 units, we had one person at our public hearing. Well, when we have 500 residents out there and we want to change something, we're going to have 500 people in here. And so what we want to do is to kind of clarify what we can do and what we can't do. So when we come in, we can tell our residents, you can tell our residents a consistent story. This is what we want. This is what was approved. This is what was envisioned. And we want to adhere to that. The problem you run into is when you start amending the PCD every 5 minutes, then those people feel like you didn't live up to the commitment you made. And we don't want to get into that situation.
And we've learned a lot over the years about that, because I've watched Drew struggle with that so often with that very reason. We have people that bought into these big PCDs, and they're the ones that they're putting an apartment complex next to. They're the ones that aren't happy about it. So they find any change, any minor change that needs to be an approval of the PCD amendment. And it's just a lot of work at that point. And we don't need it since the bigger picture's already there for everybody.
So Mayor,
Are you?
Go ahead.
I just had another comment. I didn't want to, I sensed that you were going to make a motion, but let me,
You ask your question.
if I could, item 11.2 on page 10 again. This is just more for clarification, I guess, and education. I talked to Mr. Shaw yesterday. I didn't understand the full extent of the sewer system as we have it today and fees and such. But as we've discussed, this entire development is going to have sewer pump lift station that pumps sewer to the south down to 3650 South to hit a gravity line. And my question was, with the lift station, when and how involved is the city going to be in maintaining that? Apparently the city is involved in maintaining that, but we actually already have in place in our fee structure for additional fee for those who are in a development where there's a lift station, correct, Mr. Shaw? And it does not state that anywhere specifically that I know of in here, although it does talk about everything is according to the fee schedule that we currently have. So I assume that covers that additional fee, but I didn't know that existed. So I just wanted to kind of make sure everyone else did.
Mike, or are they zonal impact fees?
So I don't know that needs to be anything part of this because
Yeah,
it's
and it
part
may
of
not
our-
need to be. I just
it's
want
part of our normal utility billing. It's in our master fee schedule, that additional fee for lift stations.
And like I say, I didn't know that it even existed, and I appreciate your input on that because I was not aware of that.
And so state law is that, anytime the sewer, it can't be privately owned. The lift station has to be owned and operated by a municipality or a
Yeah.
district. So
Okay.
that's where it would be our responsibility.
Councilman, you good?
Are there any other questions or comments?
The last thing that's just in my mind is I like your revisions. You were a step ahead of the two biggest things I was looking at. I appreciate that. The last question I had, I have on section 9 to add the trail on Washington Dam Road. I have on 11.5 to strike the word partially. And the only other question I have personally is on section 4, where it's talking about amenities. And I really appreciate Councilman Ward's approach to amenities last meeting. But I didn't know if that needed to specify a central park to city standards built in cooperation with, with Parks Department. And I don't have a strong opinion other than if Barry or somebody feels like that needs to be more clear, or if it's already clear enough.
I think it's clear in the PCD.
Barry, you okay with that? You still on?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm okay with that. I think that is the intention. I think in that language, it does say that it would be built to our standards, and it certainly would have to be before we accept it. But I agree. I don't want another problem like we had at Stookie Farms.
That's all that's what's in the back of my mind, is I just want to make sure that we don't have an issue like that, because both parties right now, their intention is to have a public park there.
Exactly.
And Councilman Coles made a good point. It was part of the PCD approval last week. So that may be sufficient. It may not need to be duplicated in the development agreement verbiage. Maybe parks is sufficient.
The Central Park, I don't remember the number, but it's probably close to 60 or 70 acres.
Huge.
Yeah, huge area.
Even to move it some, you can't miss it. So.
And that brings up a little bit of another question, is how do you determine, I guess you'll just work with the city to determine what part is dedicated to the city and maintained by the city and what part remains with the HOA and is maintained by the HOA. It's same for the trails.
Exactly. Some of the amenities, a pool, for instance, may be specific to the neighborhood.
Yes.
And so the pool would not be a part of the public park, but the trails, the trailheads, possibly things like pickleball and things like that can be available to the public. But it's going to have to just play out as we work through that and decide how those amenities benefit a community versus the overall project. But clearly we want the park and the trail system to, as much as we can, to be public. It's to our benefit, D.R. Horton's benefit, not to have to maintain, not to have to include that in their HOA fees.
Is your intention to assign this contract to them, as it says? Are you gonna maintain, or are you gonna assign this contract?
We have a single contract to purchase the entire property, which is signed and executed. The first phase of that will happen hopefully by the end of the year. We will stay in ownership for a number of years, and they're not giving us all the money up front. So even though it's a single cash sell of the property, we get our money in different takedowns. So we'll be involved. And then our contract clearly says that all our rights upon once they own it, rights and responsibilities transfers to them. So they become us once they purchase the property.
And then that sounds like that's the way this was written. So
Did you say one cat sells it?
It's technically a cash sell.
Oh, cash. I thought he was doing hip. Like, only one cat to sell.
I'm anything but hip, Jeff.
Like, gee.
Hey, just one other, just maybe an item of clarification on my part. 17.1 refers to Dixie REA. Are they not technically Dixie Power now? Does that matter?
Their name is actually Dixie Power, but their old name is Dixie RA, and you can use both.
Okay.
I just did that on an easement I wrote for them, so it doesn't matter.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure.
Just a note on that, we're actually selling them a little piece of property. It's not a full-blown lift station, but it's a little substation that goes into it. So when we put those metal poles in there, they put all the power for our project on those poles. So power is there for the project.
So in 17.2, it makes reference to a new water tank that will be provided by the city. But that's down the road, Mr. Shaw. We don't want to be obligated to put a tank out there when there's 50 homes there, right? Down the road, up the water line, however you want to put it.
Yeah, correct. So they did the water model on this. We've gone through the water model knowing when it's going to hit us.
Okay.
It is actually in our capital facilities plan, so it will be something that we construct. Yep.
And the connection points in Washington Dam Road and Long Valley Parkway. You know that already, huh?
Yep. All worked out.
Any other questions, comments?
If not, Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve a development agreement for the Long Valley Trails, a PCD development located 3000 East, 1600 South, Long Valley Road. The applicant is Brennan Family Holdings, LLC.
Are you saying with the conditions we made in
And
tonight's
with-
language?
I have at least three of them, I think. And that one was to take out to partially at 11.5. I think we decided we weren't going to try to clarify
Jeff, can you speak?
we
in
weren't
my
going to try
mic?
to clarify the park in any more in the central park any more than we had it now, but we did want to make reference to and have an understanding that there's an anticipation that as a part of the potential that we could pick up trail on would be the trail that runs consistent with Washington
Section
Dam.
Section 9 on that.
Yeah.
And then also that it's the Jeff revised version.
So we've got 6.3. We're taking it from 150% to 115%. 11.5, striking the word partial on the road build. What was it on 9?
It was adding trail language on the Washington Dam Road section.
To make a clear connection, that's what everybody's intent is. I don't know if it shows it in the
It does. It shows in the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, we're just re-emphasizing it. And Council Ward, the 150 down to 115, that language had already been changed. So if you guys have approved that number, that's great.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
this is specifying that it's per your final draft, Jeff, that you presented tonight, because that clarified a couple of my
Revised version,
initial
yeah.
concerns with density, and then
I'll get
also
that.
with the outsourcing, like 7.6 to 7.15.3 that was removed at Councilman's.
That's in his draft, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I need to add to my motion that it's the revised version.
I
That,
think you caught it. This is what we had up here for you, I think, so. That way it's pretty clear on the three specifics you'd like clarified or modified in there too.
do we need to mention 6.3, the 115%? You said it's already been clarified, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's already been done. Yeah, it's already been
I
redrafted.
think you just state
Is
the
in your,
the couple language revisions in section 9, section 11.9, and
Or 11.5.
11.5.
11.5. Oh, sorry. Yeah, 11.5.
And then the last thing was a clear connection.
That's more than 6.3 using density.
yeah, I saw that. Okay. I must have been thinking I was looking at the one document and looking at the other. So I see it now.
I do have the motion now. Do I have a second?
Well, I don't know. Was the motion completed? I never heard the complete motion.
I'd like to restate it.
Motion and added.
Why don't you restate it then?
Okay. I'd make a motion to approve a development agreement for Long Valley Trails, a PCD development located 3000 East, 1600 South Long Valley Road. Applicants Brennan Family Holdings LLC, with the stipulation that the agreement to be used was the revised version. Jeff, do you have the date on that, or do we need it? As of today's date, which is Tuesday, December 15th, as well as other clarifying language in and again, I'm questioning.
I have for sure sections 9 and 11.5.
Just 9 and so 6.3 is and clarifying language in section 9 and 11.5.
Can we state those clarifying language in the motion?
So 9 was adding the trail, and 11.5 trail verbiage, trail language, and 11.5 was striking partially.
11.5 striking partially, and section 9 trail verbiage.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah,
Just
do you have a-
discussion, please, Mayor, if I could, just a
Yes.
couple more items. I apologize. We just got this last week and there's a lot to it here that since the executive body has to approve it, I'd just like to, in my mind, at least be clear on a couple more items. Item 19.1, and I talked to Mr. Shaw about this as well, but so 19.1, Mr. Shaw deals with the storm drain impact fees. That indicates the developer, neither Brennan nor sub-developers or builders will be charged an impact fee after offsite storm drain piping is secured and installed as outlined in section 10 of the agreement. So we're okay with that. Where does LID come in play here? It's all assumed because they're doing everything according to standard, then that is covered.
Yes, correct. So they're doing all their LID and their development with these detention basins that they're building. And so they've incorporated their LID in that. And similar to like Coral Canyon and Sienna Hills, those PCDs don't pay an impact fee because they're taking care of 100% of their drainage and getting it either to the river or that major wash drainage.
Okay. But as far as the interior storm drain system, that's something that the city makes sure has responsibility for. It's in public streets and so on. So you take care of that.
They put in an interior drainage system that is approved by us, goes along with their drainage plan. And it's something that we maintain after it's dedicated over to us.
Okay. And then just one other, just a point, I guess, on 20.2, the term extension under that heading. It indicates that Brennan must submit a development application, and the development application is defined as any preliminary plat, home permit, so forth, within at least 18 months. That seems like it ought to be within 18 months, not at least 18 months. Am I not understanding what that's? It needs to be done within 18 months, or they have to come back and go through, get the process, but it says at least 18 months. So it makes it sound like it could be after 18 months.
It's a moot point. We're drawing preliminary plats as we speak.
If they don't provide it with anything, it automatically.
Okay.
You'll see preliminary plats in February.
So is that necessary?
No, I
Because
know
that's
that's
the
intent.
standard for the city right now, right? Drew,
18 months before.
isn't 18 months the standard for this? I guess, but this document would oversee that, I guess.
Well, this document should stand on its own anyway because it's a PCD. But yeah, we do have it that they have to substantially get started on a PUD within 18 months. So that's just what our PUD language says. But this can say whatever. It's say a PCD is a little bit more of a grander thing, and you can negotiate and do whatever you want. I wouldn't worried about 18. You could do whatever months you wanted. To be honest with you, there really is no standard there, Councilman. You know, just because this PCD should be whatever you all feel. Well, when you go back to all the Red Hawk and all that, yes.
I just wanted to make clear that that's there, and I understand it's going to hit the ground. You're going to hit the ground running, but I just want to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Any others? I have a motion and a second. We'll go roll call vote.
Still, by way of discussion on there, is that something you'd like to? I'm not hearing what you're saying. Are you wanting to see that?
No, I just that's worded a little funny when it says up to at least 18 months. Sounds like it's saying 18 months. It could be longer, but that's okay. I just wanted to make the point that, in this public meeting, that in 18 months, if something doesn't get started, then we have to start this process over again. It says it there, but
Well, it doesn't necessarily say it correctly there. I agree with you.
yeah, I don't really. But the point's there. The point is there. Okay.
Okay. Motion and second. We'll go roll call vote. Councilman Staley, will you start?
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Goats, aye.
Bundy, aye.
All right, that's approved. Jim?
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all the hard
now
work
you can
everybody's
now
put
you
in.
can breathe easy and have a nice holiday
Well,
season.
I don't know, because you just approved something I've never seen. So Jeff, can I have a copy of what you changed?
You can have mine.
See, we were on the,
I
we
think
were on
you're
the other
safe.
side of that last meeting. Congratulations.
Thanks, Jim. Unless there's anything else, Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Can I ask a question to the group after we adjourn?
Yeah.
We adjourn?
You got a motion. and a
Oh, I'm
second.
sorry. I need a motion to adjourn.
I made
Got
that.
it. And
Sorry.
a second.
Okay.
I made it.
Ouch.
Aye.
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 Where do I got somebody asking me where to do COVID testing. Where does the city do COVID testing?
Thanks.
At our fire station?
Oh, we're giving
So
something.
you're doing it there, so that's not open to the public though.
Hey, come to my office. I'll COVID test you.
It's not for me, thank you, but
I've got your. I'll go outside and get a